Peace, everybody. It is I, the Emma, Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror Canticle of the Mutant Guardian lecture series. If you didn't know, a book is available on Amazon. Make sure you go ahead and grab your copy if you don't already have a copy of that right there. This is episode 15, and we are continuing the conversation on the Supreme Calculus. We're doing sections 3 and 4, so we're going to go ahead and finish it out today so we can move on to the next section. I think it's like 1 or 2 more, and then that's a wrap on this book. I can move on to the next phase of my plan to spread loving kindness throughout the globe. Anyways, as always, I record these live on Facebook and then I upload them to YouTube. So if you are watching this on YouTube right now, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. There is a link to the book in the description. Make sure you go ahead and check that out. All right, so let's get busy. All right, section 3, the unified master equation, the symbolic form. We can now state the supreme calculus master equation as a process, not just a line of algebra. 3.1 structural form. At its core, we have Chuku, the one, passing through the alpha, ultra, the circuit that was associated with that voltage, resistance, and the resulting current, connecting the car and bar, which then reveals the light body, and then with current, so a light body that then has the ability to propel itself, we get a king. And so as a result, the end result is of the kind of the source, because king, kind, they come from kin, race, and then that comes from to beget. So it says that whatever the source of something is, that which comes from it is going to be of that kind. So the idea that you can be made by God and then not be God is ridiculous. It's like comparing a sapling to a sequoia. It's like, yeah, I mean, you're the same stuff, just at different stages. You're a baby. You don't understand your full responsibility, so you got to be subjected to this kind of experience before you can, become a cell in the body of the creator that is, increasingly becoming realized in its spiritual potential, if you will. So it ain't about an ego thing. It's about a understanding you a baby in this universe, and you got to subject yourself to certain constraints so that you can grow and flourish. All right, with the side channels, R equals Ak minus 1. So without the Chuku connection, you end up with the adversary. All right, Quebec, we talk about that, equals the alpha, which is the pressure, the arrow, the bow and arrow, plus the Ak, the light body. So you're shooting arrows, you got the light body, but you ain't got no movement. Egbe is alpha times 360 degrees, so you're applying a circuit to it. Resistance, a circle of resistance, if you will. So Egbe, the secret society, the leopard society. Oh yeah, so as it relates to of Chaldees, where Abraham's from, it just means city for them. But then you have it comes from words also can mean light, and is used as a Germanic prefix associated with origin. Hence Uranus, aka Uranus. Okay, approximately 2.118 there, which gives you Baal or Baal, the moon body composite without the current, without the Orisha, without the Ori. Plus, we're going to put that identity constraint on there. So alpha times alpha equals 1, and 1 times 1 equals 1. So it's 2 ways to get to the 1. All right, you either have co-equality like you have in the Trinity, or you have a gradient of resistance and pressure that takes you to the 1. So these are reflections of the same one thing. It's one destination with 2 complementary paths. All right, so the same unity can show up as inverse pairing, Carl versus Ba, or direct co-equality, which is Allah, Aleph, as the peak of Meru, the vulture capstone of the pyramid. 3.2, verbal statement of the equation. The supreme chi, the 1, focuses intention through alpha 1.61 and its inverse alpha 0.61, generating Ka geometry and Ba voltage. Their interplay creates ultra 0.381, the living current. When Ka and Ba are combined through the cipher with power, or 0.5, they form the Ak, 1.118. When the Ak is supplied with active ultra, or Ashe, it becomes Ni, 1.499, the kingly bonded state whose word is life. Deviations, or Ak minus 1 as R, 0.118, Alpha plus Ak as Kabek, 1.728, 5 times the full circle as Ekbe, 582.5, or the state, 2.118, describe different phases in the semantic construct. This is the universe generator, quote unquote. Given these operators, you can classify languages, for example, how they treat different letters assigned to the same group of semantics. Pantheons, how they separate or unite concepts like the Ka, Ba, and the Ak. Racial histories, the sun body versus moon body adaptations. If you know a little something about theosophy, the city of the sun versus the city of the moon, that's a whole dynamic. Theological systems, NOI, 5%, Abrahamic, Vedic, Igbo, Yoruba, all as different solutions of the same master equation. All right, I guess I'll go ahead and build on that real quick before I move on to section 4. Okay, so this basically just puts in paragraph form everything that we talked about in the previous parts in terms of the macro equation. But what it boils down to is that we really do live in an electric universe. I know that's become kind of jargony in terms of how most people are understanding the way that those particular scientists are, reassessing the classical model. But what it comes down to is that basically when you have the most irrational number, which is 5, the golden ratio, what it allows for is the dense packing of space without collapsing in on itself. And so that's why plants use it in order to organize their leaves in the best possible arrangement to be able to all get as much sunlight as possible. Because if it's a situation where your design causes you to cover up your lower leaves, because the upper leaves are blocking the sunlight, then it's going to kill you. All right. Peace, Flame in the building. My brother, Go Squad alumni in the building. I mean, I'm just wrapping up, building on this book right here so I can get back to making some music or whatever. This is my labor of Hercules right here. I got to get through this before if I can get back activated. I'm going to be hollering at you pretty soon here. But anyways, golden ratio allows for this. This is like the proportion that pretty much determines your body proportions, the way planets are arranged, all sorts of things associated with that. And when you start placing that such that it's self-reflecting within, equations that have to do with electricity and stuff. So we had, this is our voltage, and then our current times resistance, which is that. When those two things, when this thing and this inverse, so basically it's opposite. So they got this push and pull over there. You got this thing that's trying to push without, being stopped. You got this over here that's trying to put some resistance on it. This is the same thing that's happening with the voltage in electricity versus the wire itself. So that's your resistance. And then that tug of war between the two, the tension between them, that's what gives you your current. And then that I actually means intensity. So how intense that current is. And then that comes out to be 1/5 squared. I explained how by making that circuit, make it a circle or a coil, what you're actually doing is when you're flowing when that electricity is flowing through that ring, all right, it's the magnetic field is actually swirling around it like this right here. It's doing a little coil like this around that field, right? And so as you could probably already tell, that joint right there looks like one of those toroidal donuts I've been talking about throughout the whole thing, where this it basically folds in on itself, and then this is how we keep on returning. So it's not like a ball where it keeps on going around and around the surface. That's how we typically think, time and reality and things of that nature. But really, it's one of these kind of guys where it's kind of coiling around at the same time that it's going around, and then you can have simultaneous flow with the rings aren't touching each other, but then they flowing and they pumping up, they go up and then they go in and they come back around. So that's perpetual. That means it doesn't have to stop. It can go on forever. And that's what you do. But because we don't know the process and we fear the process because they don't teach it in the West, it's that fear that keeps us kind of locked in a darkness state once we do have to hop out of this shell, get out of this cocoon that we're in as a body. And then they done told you, well, all right, well, you got to lay in the grave until, Jesus come back. No, Jesus coming back right now, because when you understand that Christ is you, it's within you. You just gotta remember who you are, man. You gotta remember that divine spark that's within you. Remember, the Holy Spirit is co-equal to the Father and the Son. It's the one that everybody has access. It's the democratic joint that allows you to perform miracles, but it's not even about trying to make something happen that wasn't going to happen in the first place. It's about recognizing the miracle that this place, you, your children, even a blade of grass, the miracles that they already are. When you reach the state where you can just sit and look at a butterfly for hours and just have wonderment in your system, I guarantee you everything else you do after that is going to taste that much sweeter. And then unfortunately we get bogged down with work and hustling and raising kids and families and stuff, all this kind of stuff, and then we forget that we are just babies in this universe compared to how the billions and trillions of years and energy that have been put into this unfolding. So just something to wrap your head around. But that's essentially what it's talking about. See, so your source, since it's a ring, at the end of the day, and you're just going around, whatever the source and the whole are pretty much always connected. Just you're at different phases, different states, different points. And then the point also isn't just to keep looping. That's why cells divide. So we actually go through a stage like this in the womb before cells ever start dividing. And when they do, they split. So this guy become 2 like that. And then those 2 will become 4. And then those 4 become 8. And it started making like a cube. And then those 8 will become 16 and so on and so forth. And then eventually it has what it needs in order to start differentiating and making choices and decisions on what kind of cell it'll become next time. And eventually you end up like what you look like. That's all it is. So once you get done doing that and you shed that, you go back to being a light body. And so this equation is basically showing how when you're pure light, and this is something I just picked up. I think it might have been this morning, matter of fact. It's something called I'm saying this right, it's Fermat's principle. So this is the discovery. They said, all right, so light, it always takes the path of least resistance. And so they were trying to figure out, so we'll say shortest distance. So it said, how does light always know the shortest distance to take? It's almost like it's thinking. Well, what they figured out is that light actually works like a holographic projector, such that from a single point that's emanating out, that light actually reads ahead, sort of. That's kind of how they describe it. It kind of reads ahead through the probability field, because probability is like, if you got physics, there's only so many choices you can make. It's only so many paths you can make. So if you know the math of the space around you and how many paths are possible, what it basically does is it does a calculation that determines what the shortest path is going to be, and it collapses all other paths. So it's like, so you only ever see the path that it chooses. You see the choice. You don't see the decision-making process. And that's exactly how you operate. We don't see your thought process, like, unless you saying it out loud or something, but even then we don't know what's going on with the little signals in your brain and all that. We can't see that. But the action that you actually take is ultimately what we see. And then that's what you end up being judged on. So everything about our existence, complex as it may be, and the different routes that it may take, we still operate just like light, because that's essentially what we are. The problem is, if you're indiscriminate, like, you just shine every direction and then you don't manifest. Like I told you before. Let me see. So only 0.0035% of light is visible. That's it. That means all the rest of that 99.9, let's see, 875% or whatever. Now, that might still be 9. My bad. All I need is a 7. That should be 6. All right, make sure I give you good math. But the rest of that, you can't see that with your bare eyes. You need instruments to detect it. But it's everywhere, because it's taking all those paths, and you only see the path that it decides to take at the end of the day. All right? But like I said, you're the same way. That's what destiny is. It's the path of least resistance. It's the easiest path. But what gives you life in the first place is your resistance to it. So you have free will, so you can make choices, and you can choose not to take the best route. If you instantly took the shortest route, you just be done. You just die. It's like, you won. You did it, bro. But it's like, it's time for this light to go do something else. But we trap that light, and we send it through a labyrinth, a big old maze, in order to get out. And then that's where the spice of life comes. So it's like, so that struggle to untangle the knot and figure out your way through the game or whatever, that's where all the enjoyment comes from. Because it wouldn't be satisfying if you just, there's 1, 2, I'm done. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's pretty much all this is. I think that's a pretty good rundown of what that was saying in section 3. It's like, you have power, you have will, you have resistance, but you also have to put constraints on it, because too much constraint keeps you from moving at all. Not enough constraint causes you to burn out quickly. And so it's a science of moderation and transformation, flexibility without being breakable, if you will, like bamboo. All right. Section 4, reconcile narratives in equation language. Very briefly, how this helps unsnarl major stories. 4.1, Igbo, Yoruba, Hebrew, Arabic. Igbo, the ka leaning. Preserve Alpha and Phi grammar in Proverbs. Odinani, Alpha divination in the ka-centric cosmology, where Uga Aka is unity of Madu and Muo. So the unity of the physical realm and the spiritual realm is essentially what a computer is, because you take quantum information that doesn't have like a physical form, and then you interface with it and you display it on a physical, terminal on a computer. And then what's happening in between that is that quantum information is being represented in the form of current. So it's like you got electrons flowing, and then when there is an electron, it's a one. Where there's not an electron, that's a blank space or whatever. So it becomes a zero. And so you basically create a microchip or whatever with the geometry necessary in order to pump those electrons through and be able to input commands that cause those electrons to flow through that thing differently. And then we place symbols and stuff on each of those movements and directions and those actions. And we agree upon a specific symbolic set, like an alphabet or numerals and stuff. We take for granted that, these things have existed our whole lives. So we just kind of take for granted they've always been around. But somebody actually had to sit down and figure out, okay, what are the standard letters that we're going to use? What are the numbers we're going to use? And they weren't doing this just sitting around trying to be creative. Most of this happened for the same reason that I just said earlier, that with the whole principle about light following the path of the least resistance. So these are the forms that continuously pop up and we continuously settle upon after having had billions upon billions of people work out the issues of communication and survival and so on and so forth. So it's like, it was a natural progression towards having certain ideas, certain symbols and stuff like that. And certain symbols are just more efficient. And so we tend to fall on those. Yoruba, the ba leaning. So encode ba or alpha, that's the bow and arrow, the pressure, the voltage. In their Orisha codes and judicial structures. And they hold the Ocha or Ashe current very explicitly. So they hold the potential within them, within the cultures. They compress concepts of nature into characters, and then those characters hold the information. So by me understanding that particular character, I understand the principle that it represents. The closer that description of that thing matches the actual science behind it, the easier it is for you to visualize the relationships between different real life forces like gravity or light or heat, all of these. And your brain does this thing where, because you're used to human behavior and the same way that it constructs dreams, you can imagine these forces having interactions with each other like as if they were people. Like hot and cold were having a conversation, and it was summertime, so hot was whipping cold's ass. Like that's personifying forces right there. And then you could picture in your head like a fire dude out there in the middle of summer just beating the dog shit out of a icy looking dude. But as soon as winter comes around, ice get big and bad. He done been lifting weights all fall, so now he ready, and he come back and he got something for that heat. So it's like it's funny and it's like a story, but you see how easy it is to remember those relationships when you encode it like that, and then when you actually sit down and look at it seriously, you realize, oh, this is describing real stuff. All right. Hebrew/Arabic encode the R or the pole or the covenant side. So Abraham as cross/goat Kim, light through melanin, Nerys face scar. Ur as moon body, blood, sin, life. Shem, Semite as name semantic operator. So in other words, by you cultivating an exclusive identity or a tribal identity or whatever, you automatically invite opposition. It's kind of the idea. It's like just by you acknowledging separation, you expect there to be some friction. But without that resistance, there would be no spice of life, like I said before. So it's like, it isn't that you want to get rid of all resistance. It's just that you want to modulate it. So it's like, so you have things like mutual respect. We don't have to collapse into being the same one thing, but we can have like a standard of how we interact with each other in order to make sure that we still are able to operate as smoothly as possible. So it's a balance. And so that's all I was really talking about. Just talking about some of these moments in history where we create these covenants, we create these bonds, agreements, contracts, stuff like that determine how we're going to interact with each other. And two different groups don't necessarily have to be operating on the same contracts. Supreme Calculus says there are three views of the same one, Ka-Ba, Ak pipeline, each emphasizing a different operator. So they're all connected to the same system. 4.2, Nation of Islam at 5%. Supreme Wisdom's 25,000 year Quran cycle, the 24,896 mile circumference, and names like Mohol, Echo, As, Basai, or Arab fall into coherent numeric slots once you treat word as function of year number. So Mohol comes from 13086 BC. Asp is from 11916 CE or AD. Arabs from 11812 CE or AD. And I've talked about how those manifest in the calendar a few times, but I'll give you another rundown on that once I get done with this. All right, the notion of quote-unquote devil as grafted, uncontrolled Ba, white, ungrounded moon body, is captured as Quebec and type states. It's law and intellect without ultra. Yeah, I'm gonna have to clear that up as well. How long is this? Yeah, I'll do it at the end of this section. All right, raising the mentally dead becomes transition from frozen Quebec to Ni via ultra plus correct alphabet, judicial contract enforcement. Don Elohim is the judges. All right, I'm gonna tell you what all that means. All right, first and foremost, let's talk about the calendar. Maybe I made this up. Maybe I did. Maybe I discovered it. Maybe you'll discover if you dig deep enough that they're one and the same thing, because our future self is always influencing our present so that we will bring that future into existence. And our past is always rigidly trying to keep us anchored in doing the same thing over and over. And if you notice that loop, you'll realize you are in a circle, trying to figure out how to instead become a donut. All right, so anyways, so you got two overlapping cycles. All right, so you got the full precession. So because the moon tugs on the earth, its axis wobbles. So it's not straight up and down. Nope. It's tilted slightly. So it's like, so this kind of spins on itself. That kind of spins on itself. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So it makes like a little hourglass type of motion like that. And you know what an hourglass does? It tells time. So it cycles through the 12 zodiac at roughly 2,160 years a sign. 2,160 is also the diameter of the moon, so how far it is across. 2,160 is also the number of degrees in a cube. So isn't it interesting that the planets and the universe are organizing themselves based on predictable math principles? Anyways, so the length of this cycle is actually 25,700 That's 64 years. They usually estimate it like 25,765 or whatever else, but the next one would be starting on 25,765. And then they give like some higher estimates, but it's this because it's Metonic cycle. Metonic cycle is a 19-year cycle that has 7 specific years within that you add an extra month to the calendar so that you can balance out the 12-month solar calendar with the 13-month lunar or moon calendar. And so they meet up. You can predict things like eclipses and all kind of stuff like this. And so it's made up of those, spans over that many years. All right, what that actually hold on, did I do hold on my D 764? Yeah, that's correct. Okay, and so this begins in the year 13849 BCE, and what that actually spells is Mach D 13849. And just so you know, I ain't just sitting here making shit up. I'll show you exactly what it means. Let me see. Does it? Hold on, did I find it on here? Where did I find it when I found it? Oh, it might be on here. Let me see. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go to Google real quick. Yeah. All right. So I found it because I typed it in and it was actually somebody's name that was actually spelled Mahdi Ali like this. Now you normally will see Mahdi spelled Mahdi, and it's easier to find it that way, but apparently you can spell it that way too. And because it is the same thing, I can just type in the other form of it, and then so Mahdi is the guided one. As far as Islam is concerned, it says it is a leader according to Sunni eschatology who will appear and restore peace and justice before the end of the world. All right, so they've personified this concept, but what the Mahdi is, the reason that it restores peace and justice is because it starts to cycle over. All right, so at the beginning of each one of these 25,000 roughly year cycles, whoever's the best knower, whoever's like the most knowledgeable when you go on into that cycle, they become Allah for that period. So for the next 25,000 years, you got a council of 12 that elevates one to Allah. So remember, it was 12 zodiac signs. So whoever this is basically a particular zodiac sign that basically determines the pace of the rest of their time. So the question becomes, what was the zodiac age during that year? Okay. Let's see. What zodiac age was it in 13849 BC? It was the age of Leo, and there are no surprises there. All right, so it started off as age of Leo. So the whole thing is going to be centered in some way, shape, or form around lions. All right, so there is, depending on the system that you're dealing with, the end of this whole cycle is either going to end up ending in 11914 to 11915 CE, or it's going to end in 11915 to 11916 There's a version of this where you could push the 117, but I believe those are the main two. Here, all right, so what that spells out is A, 19 is S, A, D, and then A, S, A, E. This one, of course, again is A, S, A, E. This one is A, S, 16 is P. All of these are words, and not stuff I'm making up. Once again, this should not exist. But the math is the maths, and the language is the language. What's a side? Let's find out. Uh-oh. Hold up. That is lion. Uh-oh. Age of Leo. It started age of Leo, and it's ended with, ended with something that means lion. Leo is it's the sun sign that is associated directly with the sun. I would almost expect that period to have something to do with fire as well. Let's find out. Let's look at that other year. I said, okay, Latin, it is an inflection of this. Let's click on it. Come on now. Dragging your ass. All right, and then that itself is an archaic form, meaning very old form of this right here. Just click on it. Still following the trail, following the berg. I don't know why my shit so slow today. All right. All right, so that gives us altar, and apparently it's coming from a meaning of ashes. So altar, sanctuary, refuge. Click on that. Altar comes from to burn. It also has an element of being high, so something that is up high and it is burning. The burning place. Uh-oh, that sounds like a sun to me. I can't think of many places we got nearby that burn like the sun burn. And then finally, what about this other end? So at the end here, we have asp. What is an asp, you ask? For our vocabulary illiterate viewers, an asp in English is a water snake. It is a viper. It is a cobra. It means shield, because the cobra got that shield type, Why would a lion and a cobra be mentioned in the same breath? Because they literally used these symbols interchangeably back in the day, because the cobra's hood was compared to the lion's mane. Your manhood, man. That's what it is. It's all about your manhood. Nah, but it's real talk. All right, so anyways, case in point, to create this calendar, it has a specific effect on how the world operates, because during this time, the star Vega becomes the pole star. Exactly halfway in the middle of this cycle is 967 BC, and that is when King Solomon came to power. Solomon is a metaphor for his name, which means sun and moon. Wait a minute, didn't this whole cycle have something to do with evening out the solar and lunar calendar? Oop, there it is. There it is. They made the calendar to tell the story. You don't need to rely on somebody else's words if you can do math. That's how they designed it. All right, and then what happens? What's the pole star in 967 BC, you ask? It is Kochab, it comes from Arabic meaning star. All right, the Egyptian word for star is Sibar, Seba. They write it as Seba. You know who else spell their name like that? There's an alternative spelling for Sheba. As in the Queen of Sheba, who deals with King Solomon. Uh-oh. Are they telling us that somehow this star has something to do with the sun and moon? Does it have something to do with that Vega cycle? That cycle I told you about, the beginning date, it also ends at that date. So this is the midpoint right here. It's going in there. Then that circle is wrapping around like a serpent eating its tail. Well, here's the thing. So Solomon is the son of King David. David gets his name from the root Dod, which means beloved. This word comes from desire, which itself comes from desidere in Latin. You see how all these things keep coming back to Latin for some reason? They didn't make that language up. Desidere, which means from the stars. Saba, words like this, Saba. Also happens to be where the Limba tribe is from in Africa. They're a Bantu tribe who is known for a fact to have the DNA marker of Aaron, the brother of Moses, and they are therefore part of the priesthood class. After the temple was destroyed, after Solomon's temple was destroyed in 587 to 586 BCE, it was several people that fled down into Africa, they say. The Limba being one of them. All right, and they are Bantu. So this idea, so the Bantu say that they have sky ancestors, and then you got this concept of being from the stars. They're talking about being from Seba, which was located in Yemen. They talk about it being hidden. Well, that is a play on Yemen being Eman, the source of a moon, meaning the hidden one. So the one in the south of Arabia, so because they were too far south in Arabia, Neanderthals could not travel far enough south to mate and mix with them. They couldn't survive the environment. They couldn't survive the diseases of the region, and they couldn't survive the weather of the region because they were adapted for the cold. All right, so it's not necessarily something coming from the stars, but remember, light follows the path of least resistance. It's going around cyclically. It's being modulated according to a wobble. That means that we get unique constellations where we're at, and they form unique shapes that can only be seen from where we at. So all of our design of both our bodies as well as our thoughts and our words and stuff are all based around a limited set of geometric principles. And what does that have to do with King David, you ask, besides just being from the stars? Well, D, so Dalet, the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Vav, sixth, Dalet again, 464. That happens to be the exact ratio of the points, lines, and faces of a tetrahedron, four-sided pyramid, if you will. And that is exactly how stars space themselves out. So they basically, it's like a grid of these kind of, you can look at it that way. But that's how they arrange themselves. You know what else does it, that arranges itself like that? Water. So let me show you something. Let me show you some stuff. All right, so we're going to put tetrahedral water structure. Let's find that'll work. All right, so it says here, the tetrahedral structure of water arises from the central oxygen atom's 4 electron pairs, 2 covalent oxygen-hydrogen bonds and two unshared lone pairs, which spatially arrange themselves roughly 109.5 degrees apart to minimize repulsion. The geometry allows each water molecule to participate in up to 4 hydrogen bonds, forming an open three-dimensional network, which is a tetrahedron. So stars are organizing themselves the same way as water molecules. You got water molecules in your body. So what part of you is made in the image of the stars? Your water molecules. So in other words, it's saying because he is the son of David, by me using the stars to map out the sun and moon when they coordinate with each other, I can bring this priesthood into alignment with the reality instead of them operating based on speculation and just coming up with crazy wild laws that the people have to do. That's what's wrong with the world today. If you don't know this secret, that's what all of that stuff is talking about. You only looking at these, it's like, oh, it's a love story between this guy and that guy, and there was a king that was that. No, that's superficial bullshit. Why would you waste your time writing books and preserving them for thousands and thousands of years if you just gonna tell nursery rhymes? Don't play with these people, man. Don't play with them. In fact, this was written before it was written. It was written in the form of if you just producing, the letters and the shapes within a constrained field, like you can only make so many moves, and it's a matrix where you have certain rules as to how you can generate it, it's going to reliably print out the same story. So if you don't have to have each other's same stories, but if you're using the same matrix to construct your stories, then it's a very good chance that you and somebody else are going to independently come up with very similar structures for your mythology. So that was basically like our version of an internet tens of thousands of years ago. And in fact, it is in many ways more effective and efficient than what we do now, because it's a lot of noise and chatter. But that is what you have to have. That's the way you need to understand language and time if society collapses, and it inevitably will reset unless we get it so right this time that we don't have to reset. But then that's usually just a cycle. Like every 25,000 years or so, it resets, because while that pole star is situated on Vega, the ionosphere, which is basically like the plasma shield that is surrounding our Earth in its atmosphere, when Vega is the pole star, it just happens to tilt in such a way to where the ionosphere is closer to the Earth. And when it's in that midpoint at Kochab instead, the ionosphere is further away. And so what happens with us is the closer that thing is to Earth, the less separation there is between our thoughts and our waking life. So it's like, so that's when you can actually see stuff like angels and all that kind of crazy stuff they talk about in those books. That's when that starts becoming, more frequent. When that ionosphere moves further away, that's when that stuff becomes less frequent. So it's like, so people just get really rigid and scientific and get egos and all kind of stuff. But then once them Vega cycles come around, you can't really deceive yourself anymore, because everybody can see what everybody else is seeing. All right, so the devil as grafted, uncontrolled boss. So the acting power in this world, secret society is getting out of control. I talked about those laws that are made without having, I said, mailing in the covenant. But so we have contracts with the earth, and they are written. Where are they written? On our hands, so we can clearly see our lines. Whatever else, our skin regularly communicates with the light around us because it absorbs close to the full spectrum of light. So based on the direction that the sun is relative to us, The electrons in our skin, they realign with the sun instead of burning, and it makes sure that the light is hitting at a specific angle, so it's guiding the path that the light will follow, and then that results in a information exchange. As it converts that light into heat, it sends vibrations through the lattice of the skin like a crystal, and it converts that information into signals that the body is recording at all times. So it's like you may not know what it's saying per se, but all of the information around you, all the different paths that light could have taken and all the paths that it did decide to take, all that information is being recorded. So your body is actually making a recording of all the information of the universe. Sounds wild, but that is exactly what it's doing. So when you have dreams or out-of-body experiences, the reason why you can see things that you know for a fact that you've never actually seen or experienced while you were awake is because you have an entire downloaded copy of the universe. If you don't have this stuff, this big old stretch eyeball all over your body, it doesn't do that. You know what the sunlight does? If you don't have this stuff, it goes into your skin and it damages your DNA. And it could cause mutations. And the idea that your body has of the environment and of the universe, it's still going to try to make a model of the universe, but it's going to be wrong. And that's how hallucination and stuff start happening. That's when people start coming up with the wildest ideas about how the world and the universe and all that works, when we actually have a built-in melanism. You see what I said did there? Instead of mechanism, we have a built-in melanism that helps to translate the information of the cosmos. And then what did I say? Who did I say was always was considered God, considered Allah of a particular era? It is whoever is the best knower. So that means you by default, if you got this stuff, you're the best observer. But then you also have the issue of having to learn how to read that. The raw version that comes in, we call that the Krishna yajna. It's unclear exactly what the sacrifice is. Well, the clarified version Shukla, that we get directly from the sun, is, so it's a mixed up verse. So the sacrifice, that's what reveals that the sacrifice, instead of you sacrificing blood and animals and crazy shit like that, your sacrifices the ego so that you can become a conduit for loving kindness, aka the likeness and kin of the stars, and not just simply those stars up there, but then the star shape. That's why you have arm, leg, arm, head. The other signs did not get arm, leg, arm, head. They interact with this plane in a different way, but you're the one that's occupying a body, a physical body. In all the Abrahamic religions, be it Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all of them understood God to actually be physical at first, and then over time, as you had corrupt powers get in certain positions, and you had people who just plumb forgot the old teachings because they got disconnected for whatever reason. That's when you started ending up with mystery God stuff. Oh, this God can't be known. The only part of God that really matters or really pertains to you is the part that you can personally understand. If you can't understand it and they can or whatever, that's good for them. But that has nothing to do with you. That is why you have your own divine spark. You are only responsible for what you were designed for. All right. And you participated in that design process, not your ego, but the all-knowing form of you that is directly linked to God. Your Oryashar, your direct light. Oryasha in Hebrew, Orisha in Yoruba. There is no mystery God. Allah is seen and heard everywhere, especially when you look within. All right. And let's see. Raising the mentally dead. We don't deal with trying to reanimate corpses. It is a reactivation of the mentally dead, because if you remember who you are and what you are, you wouldn't be trying to stick around here forever. You'd enjoy it while you're here, but then there's so much else that you can and will do on the other side. There's stuff that you could do now to see what that's like through out-of-body experience. And that might be the next lecture series I give. I might teach y'all how to do that. I think it's becoming time to start democratizing some of this stuff. All right, anyway, so it's telling you, it says becomes transition. So when you're in that frozen, that dead state, you get that connection to your direct light by, you understand your destiny. You learn how to read your akaraka, is what it's called, how the destiny is written on you. That's a contract that you made with the earth in the form of physicality, to show what abilities and limitations you would have while playing this game. This is your avatar. All right, so but we have the alphabet as a tool. So the alphabet is the constraints to communication, if you will. So those are the pieces we have to work with in order to make this this Lego tower that we live in. Judicial contract enforcement. So El, so God, that's where the name Allah comes from in the first place. So in the Hebrew, is El. That deals with that love and kindness I was talking about, but it is infinite and innumerable. So it doesn't manifest anything directly. So you need that second part, the Ohim, or Eloh. So it's Eloh, and then the plural is Im. That makes it. It's a quality called Gevurah, which is essentially judgment and discernment. So separation, if you will. So then you can look at this as separation. You can look at this as the whole. So when we bring those two things together in balance, where you're loving, but at the same time you got, some sound judgment, that becomes a full brain. All right, so the other part of that cycle I was talking about, there's another internal cycle that is 40 metonic cycles shorter and aligns with 24004 as a starting point. Still has the same end point, but then its middle becomes that same 587 to 586 BCE window I was talking about, where the Temple of Solomon got destroyed. So the other cycle deals with when Solomon was coming into power. This is the end of it. This is the end of the temple. This is you escaping the limitations of the body. It is you knocking down the temple so that the Shekinah, the presence of God, can return to the atmosphere. That's basically what they were doing. They used that temple in order to trap the presence of God. Like it's crazy. Like once you go back and actually read what it says, but that's how they communicated with them. They basically had them trapped in the cave. And then so once you break down the temple, it's able to release. But then this is also a metaphor for your divine spark within your body. And then you have a responsibility to learn how to step outside of the body. Because once you understand that the conscious part of you is light, it can't be destroyed. And you retain everything about who you are, but then you also remember who you was before you got here. So it's an interesting experience. And I know this from personal experience. All right, so this corresponds to Yud, which is the Athabascan Native American word having to do with to flee or to herd a flock, Why is that important? Athabascans, those are Navajos, so the Navajos ancestors, whatever. What does this have to do with anything? I'm about to show you. All right, so they give you the clues. Bishop Usher calculated based on the Table of Nations. excuse me, that creation happened in 4004 BCE. And we've already established that the only people we know that were created around 4004 BCE are people with blue eyes due to the OCA2 gene mutation. But that's neither here nor there. All right. Then we're told that the Torah, the actual primordial Torah, the actual geometries and stuff that allowed creation to happen in the first place were made 2,000 years before creation. So that's 6004 BCE. Okay, and so that comes out to FOOD, food. If you didn't know, that actually comes from the word pe, which means to protect and to shepherd. So we got a shepherd here, and we've got a herding flock over here. So who's the shepherd? Who's the flock? So we established this has something to do with the Athabascans, Native Americans from the north. Well, 6004 BCE was when the Benue Congo, the Proto-Niger Congo groups of Africa split up into the Bantu groups and the and like those in Nigeria and stuff like this. All right, and this is also the time period when the Odoifa was made. So the Odoifa was basically, you use divination to limit your questions and answers to only a certain set of possibilities, and then you record that over time, and you end up with a corpus or collection of 256 possible outcomes. And so whenever you throw your shells, whatever, and it pops up with one of these binary combinations, you just look it up in the book and it's telling you what's going to happen. It is based on the actual limitations and probabilities of the universe itself. So it is incredibly accurate. The same type of system is what they built. They built the Torah off of. So the Urim and Thummim were basically the lights and the darks is kind of what it translates to, but the lights and the perfections. But the point is that you use this binary system of drawing lots in order to make decisions, and then you recorded the outcome over time. And so those decisions and those outcomes that were recorded is what became the Torah. So that's only the first 5 books of the Bible. That year, Nebuchadnezzar II from Babylon attacked because he knew they wasn't on point and then didn't understand the calendar. So he caught them off guard and he could do whatever he needed to. But he destroyed the temple and they lost the Urim and Thummim as well as the Ark of the Covenant. And because they didn't have those, they said, all right, well, we got to shut it down. We can't add nothing else to the, the documentation or whatever. So they closed that, and that's what became the Torah. So that means anything that was written after that was very likely written without the guidance of the actual computer that they were using in order to generate it in the first place. So in a lot of cases, they were guessing. And so that's the issue that the Samaritans have with the other Jews, with the other Israelites. All right. And so anyways, so Athabascans are associated with this Yud period, and then that period divides up into 4 parts. So this is associated with the seasons, if you will, and the cycles. Now this right here, so we establish that has to do with like the Yoruba and them. So the Yoruba and all those groups. So we'll just say Yoruba in general right now. They got a lot of words very similar. Now, the Athabascans are interesting because around this exact year right here, around this exact time, the ancestors of the Athabascans and the Sioux Indians, and I just learned this. Now, they say about 15, 16,000 years ago, they say Indians just hopped up one day and said, hey, we're going to walk across this land bridge and we're going to be in America. That's how they make it seem. But what really had happened is about 25. So between 25 and 15,000 years ago, you had the Q haplogroup. And just to give you some background, so everybody has in common the CT group. So everybody on the planet has a male that can be traced back to this group right here, CT. So that as far as the males go, that's who we all have in common. You got some people with A or B that other people don't have, especially if you ain't got no African in your family. All right. But CT is what everybody has in common. So these are the ones that they say left and split up into everybody else. All right. So CT, it divided into two main groups, the DE and the CF. All right. These went all down into Australia and stuff. F, they had to circle back around and then, figure out what to do with them because they didn't realize that these were a sister group. DE diverged into D and E. These are mostly in Asia, so Tibet, the Andaman Islands on the southern tip of India, and the indigenous people of Japan. They were all living down in Sundaland, so there was another land bridge from Southeast Asia down to Australia that got flooded out to, but before it got flooded, it had a civilization there. But aside from there, in Africa, the only other people who have that are Yoruba. There's a few Yoruba, Igbo, and Edo who all live in Nigeria. Apparently, Nigeria was also the former name. It comes from a name of a province during the Persian Empire that was up near like the Levant and the Caucasus or whatever else. So Caucasians did not start out black. They did not start out white. They that was a later development associated with people from Turkey. Okay, and anyways, yeah, so these came back into, so that we've been out of Africa, back into Africa, back out and in. So it's like, so some people aren't even certain which one we started out at, because it's like depending on what the chapter is. We start out one place, go out up and follow the Nile out of the continent. We come back in and we keep doing it over and over as necessary. The E ended up being the Bantu, the Aryans, those Anatolians, the early Greeks or whatever. Those are those black folks that were up there before everything went wild. CF, C and them, that was mostly like them like Mongolians, and then those Siberians and all that good stuff. All right, so C ends up giving rise to a whole slew of other groups, including, let me see, so G, H, I, J, K, R, and Q haplogroups. All right, so the Q is the one that ends up moving into that land bridge that I'm talking about. So bring that around here. All right, so the Q are the ones that end up over here in the land bridge between Russia and Canada. And because it's an ice age, all that water from the ocean is still trapped inside the icebergs and stuff. And so there's like mad land right there. They chill right there for a whole 10,000 years. They make it seem like these niggas just got up one day and decided to walk across and got stuck in America. No, they were chilling. They were fine. They were hanging for 10,000 years. And then the ice cap started to melt, and then it started to flood. So they started moving into the Americas. And so that first group, so there's two times this happens. The first group that ends up coming into the Americas is the Sioux group. And so that's what gives us like the Lakota, the Dakota, all them kind of cats right there. So the rest of these cats stay here. They move back into this region. They decide not to leave. They still hanging around up north. And around, so they stay there another 10,000. So between 15,000 up until as recent as 5,000 years ago. That is hella recent. That's like 3,000 BC. You already got stuff like Sumeria and ancient Egypt and stuff popping off by this time. 10,000 years, they still kicking it right here. One of these sea groups, these Mongols or Siberians, they come slipping up in there and they start mixing in with the Qs. So then, so between about 10,000 and 12,000 years ago, a mixed group that is both C and Q make their way into the States. And they end up becoming the Athabascans. And so their descendants, like I said before, folks like the Navajo, and they're pretty much called the Na-Dene group. So Dan, so tribe of Dan, the judges. All right, and so Dan famously divided. You had those tribe of Dan, and mind you, the tribe of Dan was originally symbolized by a serpent, or you could say an asp, like the calendar tells you. So Dan was that. They separate. You had the ones that went and integrated with the Assyrian Empire, which was the one that came back like some haters, and then put some puppet kings in place in order to take Egypt away from the Nubians or whatever. But you had tribe of Dan that had assimilated with the Assyrians, and then the other ones that had gone down to the south and had incorporated with Judah, who is the lion. Give him a nice, beautiful mane. Put some ears up here. The Lion of Judah. Okay, and then we end up associating that with Jesus later down the line. So this is the tribe of Christ. Okay. Now all right. So Dan ends up incorporating with Judah. When they change their so these ones that, you know, they live in righteous or whatever else, they become associated with the eagle. Okay. They become associated with the eagle. Then, and we start getting imagery talking about like lions with the wings of eagles and stuff. All right. Or we get like a eagle-headed lion type creature, a griffin, and that ends up representing Christ. Okay. And what does I want to say about that? And so the eagle, Vega, that's what it means, is fallen eagle or falling vulture, swooping vulture. And then Leo. So we got an alignment between Vega and Leo in the story. It ends up becoming associated with Jesus here. All right. So the prophecy for the Messiah, for a king that would come and free them, the Jews understood this prophecy to have been fulfilled when King Cyrus arrived from Persia. So you had nomadic tribes that were being oppressed by the Assyrian Empire. And they managed to slowly but surely rise up and overtake them. They became the Persians, and that is present day Iran. So this is why all this Iran stuff that's going on right now is wild. Till this day, matter of fact, and I'll show it to you on my DNA profile. To this day, the Yoruba, their full name is the Iran Yoruba. Let me show you this. Once again, so you can see I ain't just talking out of my neck. I'm talking facts to you, baby. Let me see. I should be logged in. Hold on. Didn't log me out on here. Let's see if it'll go straight to it. My account been? No, they can't expire my account. You know why? Because I paid for these results. Let me see. It should be it. I ain't getting my automatic. Don't look at my password. Hold on. Let me turn away for a second. See why. KO10. Let me see. I think that's it. I don't remember what email I used for this, to be honest with you. Hold on. Let me see. I might have did that, but I might have done this. Let's find out. I honest to life do not remember what account I used. I thought it was this one. Let's see. DNA origins. There we go. There we are. Might be some new stuff on here I don't know about. Who knows? All right, let me go to my ethnic group. So Nigeria right here. Nigerian. Okay, so we got like Nadibo, Yoruba right there. Bam. Bang, bang, choo, choo, train. What that say? Iran. Yoruba. Iran. It means family over there, clan. All right. So that's already one point of data. King Cyrus. Okay, so he was considered the Messiah because he came and he freed them Jews. The Persians were extremely tolerant of their their practices and stuff, so they didn't make them convert to nothing crazy or nothing like this. He was considered the Messiah. He was the coming of the Messiah. He was the fulfillment of that messianic prophecy, the way that it appeared in the Torah. Okay. They say that this name Cyrus comes from the same source as Quraysh, which is the tribe that Muhammad ends up coming from later on in Islam. And it is the same source as the word Christ. This is what they say. All right. So in other words, there was a Jewish Messiah, a Christian Messiah, and an Islamic Messiah, basically, type of situation. It says in the Islamic, because whenever you have the holy book and then you have commentary that's done by like the priests and whoever else. They say straight up that there were 7 worlds that were created, and each one of them had its own sun, it had its own earth, it had its own Christ. It's basically how they describe this thing. And it's the wildest stuff once you start looking and digging into it. But that's essentially what we're talking about here. Now, what's significant about King Cyrus? Well, he is famously said to be associated with the symbolism of a bear. There's 4 beasts that appear. There's a winged lion. So we know that has to do with Nebuchadnezzar, they say, in Babylon. It's really just Babylon. So Babylon wasn't always bad. It just got bad, like how America. All right, well, I take that back. Babylon was cool. Then other people started getting into it and got took over by some folks that overstayed their welcome, if you will, because there was a particular people who was in captivity after the temple was destroyed, and then they ended up rising to power, and that's how we end up with the Babylonian Talmud, which is basically the standard for the Jewish law for the diaspora throughout the world. But this was cultivated in Babylon, and he had some people that corrupted it, and you had people that decided to diverge from the alignment of the calendar and do their own thing. And so anyway, so that was them. But then the bear that they talk about, so it's a bear and it had like some ribs in his teeth or something. That sounds mad racist now that I say it out loud, but they say that is supposed to represent Persia, which was called Elam back then. So Elamites. Aramaic. Okay, and that's the language that Jesus spoke, was Aramaic, that came out of these empires here. So sure script, which was Syrians when they were in Mesopotamia, and then you get your Persian Empire that's coming up. Anyways, so he's associated with the bear. Well, if this thing had to do with Leo and Vega, it should be no surprise that so Ursa Minor is the little bear constellation. And this is all in Daniel 7, by the way. So if you want to look up these symbols, the symbolism on top of us in Daniel chapter 7. Remember that Kochab star I was talking about and associated with Sheba? Well, it just happens to be Beta Ursa Minoris. Ursae Minoris. Beta Ursae Minoris is the official name of Kochab. So for some crazy reason, this tribe of Christ and the Queen of Sheba, who was often associated with the parentage of the Ethiopians, and the Ethiopians are the earliest adopters of Christianity as they faith. I mean, it's all right there in front of you, people. It's all right there. King Cyrus the Persian. They say that Nigeria was originally a province in the Persian Empire, and then we moved into Nigeria. And so they, even in the in Nation of Islam, it says that the devil's civilization, so the devil was given 6,000 years to rule, and it ended exactly in 1914. But the first thing that happened in 1914, on New Year's Day of 1914, was Nigeria was established. They did not gain their independence for some decades after that, but Nigeria was established, and then World War I started. So that was Allah, ministering his justice, but he also held it off because we still needed to be cleaned up. We still needed to remember who we are, and so he allowed that time. When I say Allah, I'm talking about whoever was the best knower of this period. All right. And so they live, these immortals too, they live and die just like we do. They have sons. And so they have descendants on that council. According to the narrative that NOI gives. But we are all descendants of that original man. Okay, and then it required, like literally you had meteorites who, and I'm not making this up. Was it Munchausen meteorite? You have meteorites that have materials that we need in order to create like RNA, amino acids, DNA, all this stuff for life. And then the only reason they're able to make it to Earth and then make it through our atmosphere is because they literally wrap themselves in melanin. Like it's like the same way that you would make synthetic melanin if you were doing it. That's what these meteorites wrap themselves in, so that they can move, so they can resist cosmic radiation, pass through our atmosphere, hit the ground, burst open, all of a sudden you got life. So we literally forged ourselves in the stars, like in the stardust of the universe first. That plasma collapses and condenses until you have something like a rock that builds up over millions of years. They say it took him 7 million years to do this. But by that point, he already had an active intellect so that he could start assembling himself. So all the events that happened after that, or whatever, as long as it may have taken, it led to what was necessary for DNA to form here. And then it was always an inevitability that the first people who had knowledge of self and consciousness would be black people, because we needed that melanin to shield us from the radiation damage. Like, this isn't stuff they just trying to make up to have a superiority complex. The science backs it up. It's just that when you wrap it in a narrative, sometimes it doesn't sound as flattering to some people. But I mean, how clearer can you make it? All right, anywho. So the Supreme Calculus doesn't contradict Nation of Islam of 5%. It derives their structure from the construct, the reality. 4.3, the Vedas, yoga, and the African diaspora. Ka-ba-ak. So the personality, the acting power of the spirit, and then the light body. It is equal to the Jiva, Shiva, Brahman dynamic. So your life force, the animating force, is one with the ultimate. It is a condensation, like water vapor coming back down as hail. All right. Brahman mapped on to Krishna, desire from the stars. So that black, Krishna means black, the burning one. So this talking about this stuff right here. He's the cosmic Om, and he is Vega. He is Abhijit. He is that eagle. So tribe of Dan. So he was from among them, from among the righteous ones from their tribe. Ishana, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, all these figures that they come up with. This is what they are mapping. They did not become personified figures until much later. Early on in India, none of these figures were actual people or, God figures. They were known to be forces, and it was a lot more scientific, and it sounded a lot more like the science of the NOI narrative. Karma Kanda versus Jnana Kanda. Cultures that took either ritual path through Ofa Alpha versus those that took the knowledge path. Like you got to learn by letting your rump hit the stump. So you had people that did the rituals and so on and so forth and did the actions, and then you had the people who studied. So the knowledge of self versus the wisdom of self. Supreme Calculus shows why African diaspora bodies, melanin rich, musically tuned, ritual heavy, and yogic practices, Om, breath, spine, chakras, so easily locked together. You got something that's called, what's the word? I know it translates to scribe. Is it Sesh Yoga? Yeah. So in Egypt, Sesh Yoga, which is the scribe union. All right. So it's basically you are aligning your body with those letters and shapes, or whatever I talked about. Those letters and shapes came from the actual structure of the universe. So when you align yourself with them, instead of you doing a bajillion yoga poses, you limit it to the ones that have to do with 45-degree and 90-degree angles. And so by doing so, energy is only moving through your body, blood is only circulating through your body, signals are only circulating through your body in very specific configurations that happen to align with an 8-point star, which ends up becoming the glyph for a god in Sumer. So that's Dingir, aka An, meaning heaven sky. And it becomes the Dharma chakra associated with Krishna. Dharma chakra. It's your duty. What did you come here to do? All right. These things locked together because they come from a shared source. Theosophy, Aryans, and theosophical race cycles. Once you strip the racist German overlays and take Blavatsky at her clearer statements, the idea that quote-unquote Aryan spans dark to light. This is what they said. They said they were all colors. They were dark to light. And it ties the Congo, Dravidians, and Celts together. Clicks into the same calculus. This is why we have, so Shuma was named after Eshi Umu Eri. It's the godchildren of Eri, the initiate, if you will. And then Ireland ends up coming from Eri and all of this. So this is why your Celts, your Dravidians, people of the Congo, they got this overlap in their mythology and stuff. The Vedas, the Vedic teachings are very much similar to what appears in Odinala in Nigeria. So you got the sun body branch, Nigeria, the Dogon, children of the sun, the Umuora or Omooro. These are the children of the sun, the Moor. That's where it comes from. The M-O and the O-R. So moral. The moon body branch. So the Aryans, those ones that went up into the north and came down into the south. So these would be tied to your D groups. These would be tied to your E groups. Call it the Bantu, the Vega Krishna line, the moon now. The construct view says same base operators, different local optimizations. Who leaned into Ultra versus Quebec? Who leaned into Ekbe, secret societies, versus building cities? Oh, I didn't even know there was a section 5 here. It must be short. Hold on, let me see. Let me see how long that is. Do we gotta do another episode? Just to handle that last little piece of stuff? Nah, it's a little piece. We're gonna knock it out. So, contrary to what I had written originally, rather than this being episode 3 and 4, we're going to make it episode 3 through, sections 3 through 5. And so let's knock that out real quick, and then we can get out of here. We can move on to something new when we pick this up next week. Where the Canticle and the Syrian image fit in. Here's the big picture. So book 0, Canto 0, is to fold back into Eo, or Allah. So you return into Allah, the starting point. Supreme alphabet looping back into the creator function. So, and that gets into Wakanda. I'm going to do a whole side video about Wakanda in Africa and Wakanda in America and how we are the combination of the two, with a rejoining of the two. The Native Americans basically say it's two spirits. You got the creator and then you got the animator. And so when the creator breathes into the dust, that ruach, that breath of life, is actually the animator. It's the animating principle. In Igbo culture, we call that Chukwu and the personal chi. So your spiritual double, that actually is what builds your body, is what animates you. And it is directly from the creator. So it's in the image, quote unquote, of the creator. This is sin. So the word sin, so from 1914, the end of devil civilization. So this was happening in Nigeria. What does that word have to do? If I recall, I think it means like open or something. What was in? It was sin. Was it to cut and separate? Let's see. So Egyptian. Oh, okay. Yes, your spiritual double. There you go. Boom. So it is literally talking about your brother, husband, co-worker, colleague. And then it should have additional. So they, them, kiss, smell. So smell has to do with the essence. So you know what? That is more significant than I gave it credit for before, because I didn't understand that distinction before. But so you start off in an unmanifest form, which we will call quantum or Brahman. And then by the time we get to a solid form, which they call Prithvi, which is the earth element, the attribute that it brings into the game is smell. And then smell is essentially essence. So it's the ability for you to be solid and then still be able to exude your essence. And then that is what loops back around and contributes to the breath or the spirit. All right. So you are smelling what everybody else is cooking, and that's what gives you spirit. Now, this smell, the essence, like they used to say in Egypt, like you could tell a god by their smell, they would give off a special fragrance. But it's basically like you exude when you align yourself properly with the creator, then there is a certain essence that you give off. All right. And so anyways, that is because you are coupled and you are not resisting and you're not blocking your divine spark at that stage. And so that is what your sin is. So when the devil civilization ends, when you're reconnecting with your divine spark, and then as far as our count is concerned, they say that's what happened in 1914 when Nigeria was founded. So they've had this in those lessons since 1936, y'all. 1936, they've been telling you this. Moment, all letters, forces folded back into a single sine seed. So that's the point of space. That's the creator. So you're folding all the information back into a seed that then grows into another tree and then produces more seeds. A phonon packet, that's a sound packet of Chukwu's will. So because you are solid, now sound can flow through you, and so you can resonate with the original stone. You are the stone that the builder refused. Remember the Boondocks theme song? All right, so the Syrian image projector is the hardware model of the master equation. The fourfold reflection, Ndi, that comes from, so if you divided that, which figure was it? Was it the 579? So Ndi should come out to 1, 4, was it 144.9 degrees, I want to say. Let me see, what's that times 4, and I'll be able to tell you. See, 36, 16, 19, 16. I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, 16, yes, 19, 16, 17, 4, 5. Yeah. I know where that comes from. All right, so when we do, where my eraser went? On my napkin I was using. All right, so when we use the alpha value, so the resistance, so we use the exact 1.61 times 360 degrees, that gives us 579.6 degrees. If we divide that into 4 seasons, becomes 144. Remember 144 from the Bible, so 144.9, 144.9, 144.9, 144.9. So that's N, D, and then if you, I don't know if you notice on my results, it should still be pulled up here. But so we had Iran, Yoruba, and we got Ndi, Igbo. So we got both Yoruba and Igbo, 2 tribes from Nigeria showing up in this same math. So Alpha, and that's their divination system, Alpha. So that's the Igbo that was created by, it has their name written on their divination practice. The receipts are all throughout the math. All right. D times 4, Egio. Horns that scatter. Egio had to do with a goat. So Capricorn. Capra. Gabra's horn. Gabriel's horn. Resurrect the mentally dead. The 2 Calabi-Yao lobes, the dual nature, Ka heavy versus Ba heavy. So these are the string, the structure of space that allows massless waves to fold into matter. They can collapse their wave function to become what we perceive as solid matter. The central dielectric, ultra, okpi, fine structure constant layers where sound becomes form. So this is the interaction between light and matter, and it transforms into sound perturbations or collective excitations within the crystal lattice of your solid body. The Canticle walks the soul through these states, from mental Quebec, cold, just ice, melt into love, equality, just ICE as resonance. A la God axis, the Ak plus the Ultra, so the light body plus current plus movement. Build or destroy as one lung, so you inhale and you exhale. Back into book 0, forgetting, ready to start another cycle. So once you finish the book, you're supposed to read it over again. Like you read the actual Canticle, then you learn this right here, and then you start over and you read it again now that you know what everything's talking about. And that's how you get your understanding. The Syrian image is a mechanical diagram of how Chukwu speaks himself into existence through you. Chukwu is just the name for the supreme or whatever in the Hebrew context. Elyon is the word they use. Yeah, Jesus isn't separate from the supreme, just a different stage of it. whatever the logos is the intellect by which the source aspect manifests into the physical here. But yeah, Allah and El from the same source word. Chukwu, Olodumare, the owner of the pot from which the rainbow comes. You are the pot that was shaped in order to contain your spark. The supreme calculus is the set of equations that translate between the geometry you just built, the poem you read, the Igbo, Yoruba, NOI Vedic stories you know, and the way your melanin talks to the sun every day. And that's a wrap. If you haven't liked or subscribed, I need you to go ahead and do that. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube right now, the link to the book is in the description. And I will see you in the next one, y'all. Peace.